with God, and you feel the complete lack of well, you can, and I'm not saying everybody should go run out and do this, because it can also be incredibly challenging. And this is just my personal experience with it. Is it's union, it's temporary union with the divine, and you get to feel what it feels like not to meet God, but to be God, because it awakens the divine within us all, and it's interwoven with us entirely. And that's the collapse of separation between us and the divine. It's an indescribable feeling. What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is your Superior Self.
Aubrey Marcus, dude, I feel like I've known you forever. I've been just since we talked, I've been studying you and researching you. Happy birthday, by the way.
Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Tomorrow you're turning 38, man.
39.
39, excuse me. You're 81. I was born in 83. And what I wanted to ask you about is University of Richmond, philosophy. Like, why? You're a Texas guy, right?
I am, yeah.
Why University of Richmond?
Well, I grew up originally in the West Coast, and then moved to Texas for high school, and just thought I would keep traveling east and check it out. And it was just one of those things. It looked like the right school, and I don't know if it necessarily was or wasn't. I definitely had a lot of fun there, but I'm not even sure that type of education is really relevant, and especially in our world now. But back then, that was 1999, 2000. The world was different then, and it was harder to see through the kind of the screens that we can see through now, the lenses that we can see through now. But I made the most of it. I studied all the things that I loved the most: philosophy and classics and economics and writing and and theater, and just really tried to make the most of my experience.
Yeah, I mean, philosophy is, I could see you. Like, if I was going to say you studied anything in college, it was not business. It would have been philosophy for sure. Like, I know that people change. Like, I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. Like,
I hope not.
Yeah, definitely not. Do you still have some of the same? I mean, why philosophy one, and has your philosophy changed since then?
Of course. Yeah, radically different. I mean, philosophy is just the study of how to solve problems, and philosophy tackles the bigger problems. Math tackles finite problems with, well, at least at the level of math that most of us are, have access to. But philosophy just tries to tackle those bigger moral, metaphysical, emotional problems that we all encounter. So that was just something I was drawn to. I've always been something of a puzzle solver.
Now, your book, Own the Day, Own Your Life, has been I love listening to it on Audible. Like, you make a great point, in your book about commuting, right? Using that time to strengthen your education system, whether it be learning online through the commute, if you're on a train, or listening to Audible books, just to step up your game a little bit. What inspired you to write that book?
Well, I felt like there was a lot of knowledge that I had accumulated, and there was a lot of things that Onnit was putting out, but there was no place where we could condense it into one single form, where you're really drawing on the expertise of all the latest research and science and all of my own personal learnings and my own philosophies, and combining that with just the best actionable information. And when I really understood that the best way to really focus this is not to focus on a permanent lifestyle change or some 40-day plan. It was just like, all right, let's just take one day. How do you live one day optimally? And that includes enjoying yourself, and that includes like a day that you could replicate, not some, magical day that you have to prepare for all week and do it once a week. Like, how do you live a life one day at a time, one part of the day at a time, and do that to the best of your ability? And then just back that up with as much research as was available at the time. And that's, it's all still incredibly relevant. Obviously the book's only 2 years old, but 330 citations in there, and just tried to put all the best information together in one spot.
Mm. Now you recently got back from Poland, right? Like with Wim Hof.
Yeah.
How was that? I mean, there's a badass picture of you on Instagram of like you with the helmet on, like walking up a mountain with no shirt. Like that's intense.
That shit was intense. Yeah, we hiked Mount Shnishka with no shirts on, and it was cold, man. It was a 4.5 hour hike up, and we had spikes on our shoes, and just that was a kind of thing. Like when you go into the cold in like a cold bath, you can really surrender to the cold, and you want to kind of calm yourself and ease yourself into like a meditative state. But when you're hiking and it's that cold, and what Wim Hof calls the whip, which is about a 60-mile-an-hour sleeting wind that comes as you approach the summit, when you hit that part, it's pure fight. There's no other option that you have. You have to fight through. The wind is trying to blow you over and knock you off your feet. The cold is just biting through your skin. And, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn that you're able to push through a lot more adversity than you previously thought. And that's what I really got out of that experience. And it's really made so many other things easier. I mean, I just got done with a 3-day tattoo sit, and, something like going through that with Wim Hof and understanding the level of adversity that is encountered when you're pushing through that level of cold and that level of physical exhaustion and all of those things. Like sitting down and getting poked by a needle for 8 hours at a time is not so bad at all.
Well, how do you go there, like mind wise? Like, how do you get, like, is it the breathing method that he uses that helps you get into that mindset?
Absolutely, the breathing helps, but that helps from a more physiological perspective. So when you're hyperoxygenated, it helps you adapt to the cold better. From a mindset perspective, probably the biggest thing that helped everybody there on the hike is there was a group of 12 of us, and we had bonded all week like brothers, and I knew some of them coming in. But when you have your brothers there with you, and you're all doing it together, it just changes the dynamic, because you're all doing it for yourself, but doing it for each other. And so I think it really highlighted the power of, a community, a tribe coming together, a band of brothers. And that's what really made it through. I don't know if any of us would have continued on that hike if we were alone, just for our own fun, but when we're all together doing it together, it became kind of this initiation, and we were all lifting each other up.
How close were you with Wim before that?
I was pretty close. I mean, Wim is a unique individual. We have a lot of love and respect for each other, and it was just great to see him again. And he's got a really warm heart. They call him the Iceman, but he's one of the warmest individuals that I've ever encountered.
I love doing his the breathing exercises. I try to do that. It's crazy. I try to do it in the morning, and you just feel so different. Like you just flood your body with oxygen, and it's like just chemical reaction in your body. You just feel alive. And I try to do like the cold showers in the morning. Like I'll do the transition. So like
why you try? Why don't you just do it?
Oh, I just do it. I mean,
just do it. That's
I try to do it on a regular basis.
Well, every time you shower, just do it. Yeah. That's the message, right? The message is instead of trying, you just do it. You just know that when you shower, you're going to turn that nozzle cold. It doesn't matter. You don't always have to do a long stay. sometimes we're in a hurry and we're doing stuff, but it's just knowing that like this is part of your practice. And I think that's the thing that I try and talk about in the book. I call it mental override. And I talk about that chapter 2 of the book, where I talk about the Wim Hof method and my experiences with it. But it's really just a commitment that you're going to do this for yourself, because when you do get out of that cold shower, as you feel better. So it's an act of love to yourself to do it, but it takes the courage every single time to turn that nozzle. But if you don't give yourself any outs, you won't take those outs.
Yeah. I mean, I set the timer on the Alexa thing in the bathroom for like 3 minutes. Feels great. Feels awesome. But I can't imagine walking shirtless up a mountain with like sleeting ice. Like that's intense, man.
It was intense.
And then you spent 7 days in the dark.
Like, 6 full days.
6 full days. Like, like tell me about that. Like, what do you do? And like, you're diving into the deep depths of your consciousness and unconsciousness. And like, who do you meet there?
Yourself.
Yeah. But I
Yourself.
mean, like, you're very spiritual, man. Like,
Right.
like you've done some crazy meditation techniques. Like you
All
do
the
the,
plant medicines, all
yes.
the meditations, all the breath work, all the ecstatic dance, all the sensory deprivations, I've done all the things, and you learn about yourself. But when you're that long immersed in complete darkness, complete silence, complete solitude, you have to confront the deepest parts of yourself because there's nowhere to hide. There's nothing to distract you. There's no thing that you can do to change the channel. It's just you and your mind and your consciousness, and that draws you to the deepest parts of yourself, and you really get to observe yourself. There's a part of you, the witness of who you are starts to come alive, and then you start to really witness your life in a different way. So of all the things I've done, that's been the most powerful medicine journey I've ever been on.
And did you do, I mean, when you're 6 days or whatever it is in the dark, like, are you on any other type of medication for that? Or are you
you know
just straight sober, just diving deep inside of and meeting your true self?
the darkness is
The
the
darkness.
darkness is the medicine.
I got this brand, right? Like this, not brand, it's not my brand, but I'm doing this theory of built in the dark, right? Like for all the entrepreneurs, like I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I go running in the dark because that's where I build myself. Like I do it so no one sees me do it. So that way, when the light hits me, like I'm this different form of success, right? Like no one sees me doing this. Like I'm not putting this out that I'm, having an interview with you, because I want to reveal it at the right time and show people that I get up on a regular and work my ass off every day to be my true self, not for the fruits, but for me.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this book right now. The Great Work of Your Life by Stephen Cope. I don't know if you read that or not.
No.
So he lives by 4 rules. Know your dharma, do it with all your soul, all your might, let go of the fruits and turn it over to God. And that's what I'm trying to do, man. I trust my dharma, which is this, and I do it full out, man. And
what else are we here for? I mean, we're here to
well,
half-ass our way through, like that's absolutely the right perspective. Like, just go for it, man. Like, go for it.
But the ego, you're asleep to that for a long time. Like I was asleep to the ego for a long time. It wasn't until 2-3 years ago where I finally started waking up. It wasn't like a alarm go off and I wake up. It was like a gradual awakening.
And you'll continue to gradually.
Yeah. Like
that's why you have to surrender yourself to the journey and enjoy the journey, because if you're destination focused, well, there's only one destination, and that's death. So if you don't enjoy the way, your way there, because you're going to be growing, evolving, learning every step of the way, all the way. So, you better enjoy the process.
What was it for you that started you down this path, down this journey of awakeness, of consciousness?
Well, I think I first started training my mind and trying to pack my mind with as much knowledge as possible. And then I went on a vision quest when I was 18, and it really awakened me to the other part of myself, which you could call consciousness or soul or spirit or the witness, or there's a lot of names for it. And I'm not, I don't have any preference over which name you use, but nonetheless, there's that other part of ourself that I became aware of. And when I became aware of that, I became incredibly curious about how to expand and explore that. So that started 20 years ago.
And then like, what was the next step for you? Like that started, right? And like, how'd you explore that?
Well, it was intermittent, I mean, I was off to college. I was playing a lot of beer pong and joining the fraternity and talking shit in my intramural games. And then occasionally going out and meeting back up with the same shaman who took me on the vision quest and exploring myself deeper, and then going back to the beer pong and the regular lifestyle, and just gradually more and more and more, and, escalating in the intensity of the journeys and the frequency of the journeys, and then layering in the meditation practices and the other things that, really can help you get back to those similar states that you reach in these kind of incredibly transformative and expansive experiences.
The shaman stuff like really interests me, like the ayahuasca, the ceremonies, and I know you've done probably a number of those. But there was one experience where you were meditating with a plant, like a rose or something like that.
Yeah.
And your story, I don't know if you could tell it now, but it was just powerful for me. I don't know if you remember exactly which one. It was like the last rose.
Sure. I mean, I think so there's a tradition in the in the kind of with the Peruvian indigenous shamans and a lot of the ayahuasca shamans, and that's called a plant dieta. And it's where you go into a meditation with one particular plant. Now, when you do it in the Amazon, there's a variety of different plants that are native to the Amazon that you can use, like Chiricsanango or, Haremocaspi, or a bunch of different trees and different barks and different roots. Some are psychoactive, some are not. But I chose a plant that I was a lot more familiar with and had a lot of more familial resonance with, and that was the rose. So with the same kind of technology and intention of being with basically what the shamans there would call the spirit of rose, because they believe that everything has a spirit, even plants, and being with the spirit of rose and asking rose to teach me and actually help merge my spirit with that rose so I could learn the lessons. And it was a really powerful experience. It was 21 days in isolation, no darkness, but I was on my own, and every day, I would drink water that had rose petals dipped in it, and kind of commune on a consciousness level in my meditation with the rose. And it taught me more than I could have ever imagined. I mean, I think one of the lessons, I remember having a vision, and this is sober visions, which is, something that you can reach in a meditative state, somewhere in between that waking and dreaming state. I remember one particularly powerful one was I saw myself with holding a bunch of roses, and then I saw myself turn those roses around. And when I was angry, I saw how I used my words, like the thorns on the rose, to hurt people. And, you get filled with anger and you want people to feel your hurt. And so it was it's an image that I'll never forget about how, even when you're dealing with something like a rose, it has thorns. And it was a reminder not to use those thorns as a way to hurt, but to give people the flower instead, which is your love and your presence. And so, there was countless lessons from that experience that you learn, because you have to reconcile with the whole plant. It's not like you just get to dance with the petals. If you're gonna engage with the spirit of a plant, just like the spirit of a person, you're going to be engaging with the entirety of that entity. And so that means the petals, that means the leaves, that means the roots, that means the thorns. And so there's things that you can learn from all of those different aspects.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff is powerful. It's like very symbolic, but it's powerful, and you can apply it to every aspect of your life. I know there was another story where you were going out and picking the last rose off a bush, and like you went in directly and started meditating, and it was like all of a sudden the ceremony or the meditation started, and the rose was like, "How dare you not take in my essence? How dare you not smell me?" And
that was recent actually. That was actually after the dieta. And it had been some time, and since I'd communed with the rose, and so you kind of forget, that's part of life, part of being a human, is you remember and you forget. And I went and I wanted to grab this rose for some reason. Maybe I was going to give it to somebody, or I wanted to pick it, and I picked it, and I had this really clear message, like, how dare you pick me from my living plant without at least first smelling me, like at least first acknowledging me and taking in the essence of what this thing is, and just so focused on taking that you forget to appreciate and have reverence. And that was another, again, a powerful reminder. There's ways to learn all around us. If we just pay attention, everything will teach us.
It's just paying attention, man, especially on the East Coast. It's like, everybody's stuck in that rat race, and it's like I said, the ego takes over. Like the ego fools you into thinking that the ego is you, and it's not you. And you got to realize that you're something more powerful. And then like your meditation techniques and your ceremonies that you do, I mean, it takes you. I've never done it. Like I'm in a position where I can't do that yet, and I'm very interested in it. I'm I'm researching it, and I'm very interested. Like, have you ever experienced that type of consciousness, like through regular meditation?
Sure.
Yeah. Like that,
Sure.
that higher consciousness, maybe even God.
Mm-hmm.
What is that experience like for you? Like just straight meditation, though, without any type of psychedelic or anything like that, plant-based.
Well, you have to surrender your desire to achieve that every time. It's not something that's going to happen all the time. And you just set the conditions for it. And then sometimes things happen where you break through at an incredibly deep level and you feel, you know, incredibly connected. In that connected space, you can encounter some amazing things.
Mm.
And sometimes it's just kind of relaxing, and sometimes your mind beats you. You know, sometimes your mind wins, and it really depends. But that's why it's a practice. It's something you just go back to over and over, and you know, as you get better at it, it becomes more reliable. You find the ways to drop in to those deeper states. I mean, a
Mm.
lot of what's happening there is you're changing your brainwave patterns. You know, if you follow the work of Joe Dispenza, you're changing your brainwave patterns, sometimes into theta, sometimes into high
Mm.
gamma. And in those states, you have access to different planes of consciousness that can teach you
Mm.
and teach you about yourself or teach you about the world or show up in any variety of ways.
Like, what's the best method that works for you? Like, how do you get from beta to alpha to theta?
Well, I think one of the best methods is binaural beats is something that I use pretty frequently. So that helps drop and entrain my brainwave patterns in from, so if I'm in beta and I set like a theta binaural beat, I actually think I have some for free on my website, aubreymarcus.com/beats. And it's my favorite track, but you drop in and what you end up experiencing is your brainwave, you know, kind of getting entrained by the audio technology and dropping into those other states. And again, sometimes it works better than others, but it's one of the more reliable techniques that I use and something that I use probably the most frequently,
Mm.
because it's like a meditation, but you're getting assistance, you're getting auditory assistance. So that's one method. The other method is guided meditation. It's very rare that I'll do just a pure me sitting down, you know, doing nothing meditation. I'll typically use some kind of other assistance, something I'm stacking with it, either a guided meditation or the binaural beats or a sensory deprivation tank, which is another great technology. Um, but you know, I have done it just raw dog, so to speak, where I'm just sitting on a cushion and you know, focusing on my breath or just letting myself witness my thoughts as they pass by like driftwood on a river.
Speaking of raw dog, um,
Was that the transition you were looking for?
no, but I mean, might
You
as
were just
well.
waiting for me. You were just waiting for
I
me to say
haven't heard
that.
raw dog since, I don't know, married with 3 kids. I heard raw dog for a long time.
Well, obviously you've been doing a little raw dog.
Oh, that's awesome. So I was doing some research, like I said, and back to your earlier days, like you go from philosophy to the executive VP of marketing for your stepdad's Fleshlight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was talking about that
Is
with,
this the transition to raw
yeah,
dog? Talking
yeah,
about
yeah, yeah, raw dog. How do you like that? I was
Smooth.
just like thinking about that, like how was it hard to be the marketer for that? I mean, obviously, you know, first off, your stepdad makes the Fleshlight, and how does that even come about?
Well, it came about. My mom was pregnant with my twin sisters, and she was 40 when she got pregnant, and so it was a high risk pregnancy,
Mm.
especially with twins. And the doctor told them that they shouldn't have sex during the last 2 trimesters, just because that's stepdad's a pretty large guy. He's like 6'3" and 280 or something like that. He's a big dude. He used to play football and was on the SWAT team. And doctor was like, nah, y'all probably should chill on this for, you know, 6-8 months. And my
He's like,
stepdad's a really
no.
faithful guy and an inventor by nature. And he went to the sex toy shop and was like, all right, what can I do here to spice things up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't find anything that was even reasonable as a male sex toy. So he's like, I'm going to make one. And so, you know, he just
That's awesome.
set about creating the material. And then the kind of aha moment was to put it in a discrete container so that it wasn't like screaming in your face, like this is a pocket pussy. And they'd spent, you know, the years to develop it. And then slowly that business started to grow. And when I got out of college, I started my own marketing company, and they were one of the clients that I work with.
Mm. Now, how do you make that though? Like, how do you make that model? I mean, do you just like, how do you make the fleshlight? I was listening to your Joe Rogan like podcast 46, I think it was. And I'm like, he brings up the fleshlight. I'm like, how do you even like do that? Like, yeah, he's definitely an inventor. Like, but how do you model that, man? Like, that's nuts.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first part was getting the material. So, they use like food grade mineral oil as like the primary ingredient, so it's
Mm-hmm.
safe and healthy enough to actually get on your skin. And then they made a completely custom gel that felt really good. And then the next part was to sculpt the labia itself. And so they sculpted, I guess you would call it the labia or the vulva or whatever the correct terminology is for that. But so you sculpt that, and then you pour a mold, and then you make the mold. And then once the mold is in steel, then you pour the liquid gel into the mold, and then you pull that out when it hardens, and then you stuff that into a plastic container that looks like an oversized flashlight. And there you go. You got a flashlight.
It's genius, dude. I remember the first time I heard about that. I was like, that's genius. Why didn't I think about this? Oh man. And then you transition out of that. And then I think it is you and Bodie Miller, right? Like he comes to you with some type of hangover supplement.
No, I came to him with that. And I said, I want to start a company. Bodie and I, at that point, we were all partying pretty hard still. And, finding things to support yourself when you've gone a little too hard at the bar or at the house party or whatever you're doing, finding something that could really replenish some of the ingredients that you've lost during that process. So that was my original idea for Onnit. And he was my best friend at the time, and he was the first guy to put in a little bit of money into the company. And we set about making that, but it didn't work. I mean, it worked. The product worked, but it didn't work in the marketplace because it was too high end. It was too expensive. And I think it might work now. It's just there's a lot of, obviously, fast forward 5 years later, and there's tons of hangover supplements that are out there now that are actually doing well. But at the time, it wasn't really the timing for it, or maybe I didn't have the skill to market that. It was a good idea, but what it did is it got me into understanding how to manufacture supplements, how to go and do all the research and work with doctors who understood what was happening on a cellular level in the body and how to help repair those different systems. And then that's why when I had that conversation with Rogan and I asked him what supplement he would like to take just as a friend, and there was no strong business intention behind it. I was like, well, what would you like to take? Because this isn't really working. And he's like, well, I'd like to take a nootropic, a cognitive enhancer. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to try to make the best one that's ever been made. Mm-hmm. And, with a ton of research and a ton of help from a lot of the leading medical professionals, we were able to create Alpha Brain. And, when we made that, we knew we had something really special. And that was really where Onnit took off.
I saw something on your website about Dr. Dan Engel. Is that how you say his name? Did he help you with Alpha Brain?
I met Dan after we'd created Alpha Brain, but he definitely helped us refine that formula. He's a psychiatrist and MD, and he was, definitely involved in that. Dr. Martin Lazar, who's a neurosurgeon, he was involved in that. So we had a lot of help from them. But really, a lot of information is available if you start researching the clinical trials on PubMed. I mean, that's where I got the majority of these 330 citations that are in my book, Own the Day, is just going to the, public resources that are available online where you can really do your own research if you have the time and patience.
Yeah, I looked at one of the clinical trials and looked at the reviews. It was like 6 weeks after taking Alpha Brain. I know I've taken it. I'm not just saying that either, that it actually works. I could definitely see signs of my memory increasing, like my awareness. And that's why I love it. And I think a lot of people, especially on the East Coast, haven't heard of that. Like you were the first sponsor on Joe Rogan, right? Alpha Brain?
With the fleshlight.
Fleshlight, that's right. Yeah, fleshlight. Yeah. And then that helped you. You're actually partners with Joe Rogan on it, right?
We are.
And then Alpha Brain, I love it because the one thing that I've noticed as we get older, obviously, is the memory tends to fade away. especially with like what I do in my transportation business, not my transportation business, but my profession in transportation. As we get older, a lot of information comes at you fast and quick, especially as a podcaster and doing research like this. Like, you got to be on top of your game. And I've taken it, and it definitely helps me, remember things and remember words and put sentences together and make
Yeah,
sense.
that's what the clinical trials showed. I mean, one of the biggest improvements was verbal memory.
Mm.
And so they do the California Verbal Learning Test, which is it's a double-blind, placebo-controlled study by the Boston Center for Memory, and that was one of the tests that showed the most significant increases. Was you give people a list of 20 words to remember, and the people taking Alpha Brain could just remember more of them. And so verbal memory, focus, executive function, there was a lot of things that we showed that, echoed exactly what a lot of the customers were saying they were feeling and what we were experiencing as we were taking it. So it was great to have that validation from actually 2 clinical trials that we did with an independent organization.
Mm-hmm. I know some of the clinical trials that showed like some of the ingredients in it actually were used. It helped Alzheimer's disease and things like that, like help those guys gain, I guess, better memory and better focus for them as well. And some of the clinical trials. Do you know any of
Yeah,
that? Any of the
it's
science?
interesting, and I think the supplements have to steer away from trying to treat any kind of disease condition, and so that's not something that we're even at liberty to talk about. But there's some really interesting research if you start looking at some of the ingredients and the way that these ingredients have been used for a lot of different memory conditions. And I would just encourage people to do their own research and check it out. I mean, and there's some really interesting emerging research on one of our ingredients, which comes from cat's claw, which is a herb from the Amazon. And, so there's lots of things that support not only brain function, but brain health. And I think that's one of the things that separates Alpha Brain, is that it's not just something that makes you feel a little sharper, but it's something that's actually going to help support the body's ability to restore and rejuvenate the brain health.
Yeah, and you guys stand behind it, because I mean, I've seen messages where if you're not satisfied, you'll give them 100% refund. So I mean, you guys stand behind your product.
Yeah, but and the thing I wanted to make sure is it's not just 100% refund, because usually that's a game. Somebody offers a refund, but you got to jump through all these hoops. You got to have your original packing slip, and you got to put it in an envelope that's been sealed by a rabbi and blessed under the moonlight, and then has to fit all these criteria. And then 3 months later, you'll get your money back, and it's all a big game. But we know that we have a great product. So if someone wants their money back, just holler at us, let us know, and we'll give you your money back. You don't even have to send shit back. And that's only possible when you're actually really believing in what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you got to believe it. You got to believe in your dharma, man. This is your dharma. I mean, you're doing a lot of good things with human performance, human wellness, mental health. What else?
I've been plenty of my own mental hellness. That's for sure. That was a Freudian slip, but that's right. Yeah, trying to find my way out so I can leave the footprints for other people to find their way out.
How'd you get linked up with Rogan? Like, I know you had the first sponsor. Like, I mean, you were in, he's been doing it for 10 years, has over 1,000 episodes. I mean, you were on like 46. I mean, you got in early.
Well, I followed him. I followed his comedy, and he was doing stand-up comedy. I heard him do comedy, and I was also a huge fan of the UFC. So I'd heard him commentate on UFC. That probably drew me to his comedy. And then I listened to his comedy show, and I was like, holy shit, this guy is interested in exactly the same things that I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. I'd love to get to know him. But so when he came out with his podcast, and podcasts were in their infancy at that point. I mean, as I said, like, he didn't have advertisers on his podcast at that point. And I was like, hey man, I'd love to, be an advertiser, be a sponsor on your podcast. I got this thing called The Fleshlight. He's like, can we talk about it? And he's like, sure. Like, I'll meet you for coffee. And I was like, sweet. And so we met for what was supposed to be coffee, and it ended up being a 4-hour conversation. And that led to a friendship that, I believe will be a lifelong friendship. And, just taking that chance. And I think it was interesting because the time that Joe was available to meet for coffee was also a time that Bodhi had invited me to the most extravagant, extravagant Kentucky Derby weekend party of all time. I mean, he was full red carpet and might have been hanging out with the, Brady and the Patriots, and it would have been this crazy event, right? Like the peak experience of what a party could be like. But, I told Bodie, like, nah, man, I just have a feeling like this coffee with Joe is going to be important. And it was, and it, changed my life forever.
That is amazing, man. The first sponsor of Joe Rogan. Like, that's nuts, man. Like, how did you even get how'd you even call him? I mean, did you just, were you at that status where you can call somebody like Joe Rogan?
No. I mean, nobody knew who I was, but I reached out to his management team, or I can't even remember how I figured that out. But he had obviously, he had people that organized like his comedy tours and things like that. And you can find your way into it's much harder now. Obviously, Joe is like, he's a giant, so he's got layers and layers. As like, good luck trying to get in touch with The Rock or somebody like that. Like, you got like 9 layers of separation. Joe's not quite that many layers, but it's different now. But then I was able, I think, to get in touch with the person who worked with him on booking his comedy tours. And I was like, hey, I'm interested in sponsoring this podcast. And they're like, all right, we'll pass on the information. And I think, interestingly enough, everybody was like, do not advertise for the fleshlight. Like, what? And he was like, and someone tells Joe no, he's like, oh really?
Yeah.
Watch me. So I think that probably actually helped the situation.
It's crazy how the universe works out, man. Like,
it is, man. It is. When you look back in hindsight, it's like, it's just you really feel like the guiding hand of the universe. But sometimes when you're looking ahead in the future, despite how many times it's all worked out in the past, I still sometimes look ahead in the future and go, this time it's all going to be fucked. I know it. I'm sure. It's a very funny thing that the mind does. And of course, you go through your hardships, you go through your challenges, but given enough time, what I've found is that I'm really grateful for everything. I wouldn't change a thing.
Dude, you're fucking crushing, man. Like, I mean, you look at the gym, you look at Onnit, you look at Black Swan Yoga, you look like all the things that you're doing. Like, you're just, everything's related to one another, right? It's all about health and human optimization as far as getting yourself better and living your best life. And you got the podcast and you're crushing it with that. Like, I mean, you're on top of your game, man. I think. Anyway, looking, outside looking in.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that, and I'll receive that compliment. And it's interesting because I know what my potential is, and my potential is I'm not even close.
Really?
Like, I'm not even close. And that's the beautiful purview that I have. And I'm grateful for everything that I've accomplished, and the external validation of having created Onnit and all these things is all fine. But I know there's levels that I've yet to even reach. And some of these things will come. Something hit me this week. This very week, I experienced a feeling where I recognized, and it's a little too personal to discuss the details, but I had an experience where I realized, like, wow, I'm not even close to what I'm capable of being. I
kind of want to know now. Now you got me like, fuck, man. Now I want to have like that experience. Like, I want to handshake God. I want to be like, ask him 1,000 questions. I don't kind of like, what is that personal experience?
Well, I've had those experiences, and those are beautiful. And those have been something that I've been very blessed, and that's been a consistent thing. I'm able to access that level of communion with what you would call the divine or source or God or whatever you're comfortable with. Again, I tend to offer a variety of different vocabulary because people have attachments to different words. But I'm fine with God. That wasn't it. Honestly, it was an experience where I felt love for someone and it wasn't even somebody I'm with, but I just felt love for someone that was so intense and so powerful that I recognized that if I really loved someone that much, that I really love someone that much. And I think it's something that parents experience with their kids and many people experience with their partners. But if I love someone that much, I could feel what it would bring out. I felt what it would bring forward in me. And it was something far greater than anything that I've ever felt before. And it was just an understanding of how it would focus my life in a really interesting way. And again, like the thing that I think people can relate to is they say you have a kid and everything changes. And I think the reason is that you have something that's absolutely greater than yourself that you love. And when you love something so much greater than yourself, you're willing to, like you're doing, get up at 4 a.m. every in the morning. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't love yourself to the maximum capability. I think that's an essential element. You can't just love other things and not yourself. It won't work. You can really only love something if you actually love yourself as well. But nonetheless, my experience was like feeling that and going like, oh, wow, like I get it. I get it. If you really love somebody who you really admire and who really draws the best out of you, at that point, I think there's a level of potential. There's a level of willingness to sacrifice. There's a level of focus that it would bring into my life that, God willing will be there. But nonetheless, like that gave me a real wake up call. It was almost like, I wouldn't want to drink a drink of alcohol unless I could enjoy it, unless it was like part of the purpose of what I was doing. I wouldn't want to, everything in my life got really simple. It was like, oh, if I really loved this person and felt this much love, like how much would my life change? And it would change across the board, because I am doing a lot and I'm working hard, and but there's just levels. There's levels of commitment and levels of depth and levels of inspiration that I think you can reach. And any way that you can use one of those levers to help pry you into those states, I think is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I think that I think love is a lot of people just use it, right? They just throw around the word, but when you actually feel it, like in your soul, like in your entire being, that's so much more powerful. But it can also be scary, because it's like you were talking about with your kids. Like, I love my kids so much on a deeper level, sometimes more than I love myself, that it scares me, because you fear for their lives at times. Like, you fear what's going to happen to them. You fear, like I fear the future, like what's going to happen in the future with climate control, with the way that VR is going, with augmented reality, virtual reality. And it's like that love, like to feel that and be conscious to that is so powerful, man. Like, and like you were saying earlier, getting up at 4 a.m. and doing those things that make me a better father, because I got to do those things to feel better about myself. That way I can be my full self to them. Right. That self-care is important, because if you don't do that, man, like you lose yourself, you lose your being, you lose who you are. Like, I get up and run, not because I'm running for a marathon, but because I'm running for life. I'm running for my true self. I'm running so that I can think clearly, that I can allow my mind to just like flow with ideas. And that way I can kind of, fight the ego a little bit and let him go rampant for like 2 hours or whatever. And then come back and meditate and be one. So that way I can love my family to the fullest and be there for them and experience what you're feeling, man. That's some powerful stuff.
It is, man. And I think it's something that I hope everybody gets to feel, but it is like your point that you were making. It's incredibly important to really love yourself first, because if you're in a deficit of love, then you're going to always be needing and requiring it from other sources. So in the abundance of your own love is where you're going to be able to pour that love to your family, to the ones you love. It's essential to start there, but then having that plus, those other people that you really love, so much that you're willing to really focus your life and dedicate yourself to something much greater than yourself. And you can do that not with a single person. It can be for the entire world, or it could be for a cause, or it could be for any variety of things. But, I think that having something that's greater than yourself and loving yourself those are the two things that are the greatest motivating forces.
So I've been reading a lot about Dharma, like finding my Dharma and trying to do it full out and let go of the fruit and turn it over to God. Like, have you found your Dharma? Have you found what it is that you're supposed to be doing?
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
have. Am I doing it perfectly? No. Can I do it better? Yeah. But I know what I'm here for. And I'm here to help awaken people to the truth of who they are. I'm here to adjust human consciousness, because I think that's the upriver, that's the wellspring from which all subsequent problems or joys and blessings arise, is our own awareness and our own consciousness of who we are. And if I can help people become aware of themselves and love themselves, and then they're going to start loving the planet, they're going to start loving each other, and we're going to be fighting less wars and destroying our earth a little bit less, because we're going to care about it more, because we care about ourselves more, and we understand that we're all connected. So for me, my real focus is human consciousness, and the awakening of human consciousness, expansion, I should say.
I love that, man. It's hard though. Like, how do you get people to become aware and more conscious?
Bit by bit. It's the old saying, like, how do you eat an entire cow? One bite at a time. Like you don't eat the whole cow. You just chip away at it. It's just constant. Every day I post on my Instagram, doesn't matter what day it is, and there's going to be something there of value. Sometimes it's silly and it's me stacking rocks or something like that, but a lot of times it's there for that reason. And every week there's going to be a podcast, and every week there's a newsletter, and every morning I have an inspirational text. If you want to text me and get on the text list, so you can wake up every day with an inspirational message from me. All of these things are ways, in the books that I write and the company Onnit, obviously, and everything that I'm doing is dedicated to that purpose. And so it's just bit by bit by bit by bit.
Love that, man. Bit by bit, brick by brick, and
brick by fucking brick.
You do it in the dark when nobody sees you, and you fucking, that's who you meet. You go into the unconscious, and you learn who you are, and you meet your true self. And that son of a bitch can be scary.
Can be. It's always a tyrant, but you decide whether it's scary. It's just, once you accept your darkness, once you accept your shadow, and accept your shame, and accept all of these different things, then that's the point where it becomes no longer scary. It becomes interesting. It becomes curious. Like, I wonder what's behind that wall. I wonder what's behind that. I wonder what's in that shadow. And that's where the path of growth accelerates, when you get really curious and you don't get scared. And unfortunately, that's a place where I really feel like I'm at. Doesn't mean that it's easy, definitely doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's a great feeling to know that there's no parts of my own psyche that I'm afraid to explore. There's no parts of my own ego that I'm afraid to expose. There's nothing there that I'm afraid of.
What were you ever afraid of that? Like, when you first started down this journey, like, what are you afraid?
Of course, there's the more you are in ignorance, the more that there is potentially available to expose, and the gap that you have from your own current awareness to the awareness that you might reach can be quite frightening, and typically is. And when you go into these journeys, there's a heightened sense of things, that what you experience may be very difficult. But it's just practice. It's like you watch a real champion MMA fighter. You watch John Jones walk out to fight and defend the belt, and you see him smiling, you see him looking out in the crowd. You don't see fear in his eyes. He's not scared. He's been there so many times that this is just what he does. Whereas you put me in the octagon, I'm going to be ready to shit my pants. Like, that's not something I've practiced, but switch roles, and you give John Jones, you put him in front of a couple cups of ayahuasca. I guarantee you're going to feel like I'd feel if I was going into the octagon.
That's awesome, man. How do you know? I was going to ask you about something like that too. And you just that whole image of John Jones freaking doing ayahuasca fucked me up.
Maybe he does. Maybe he's just secretly out there just fucking hitting.
I mean, didn't he piss dirty or something like that at some point? I mean, I'm sure he's doing something.
Well, that's the opposite of ayahuasca. That's like anabol ayahuasca or whatever that is.
Yeah, I'm just so obsessed with the idea of like doing those ceremonies and like meeting God or that higher consciousness. Maybe we are a part of God. Like, you know,
What do you want to do when you meet God?
I want to feel him. I want to feel that pure love, man. Like I just want to feel his presence and know that he's a forgiving God, and that he's all love.
It's beyond forgiving. It's beyond forgiving. I'll tell you the nature of God, and the nature of God is the one that holds no record of wrong. I think we have this misconception that we have to ask for God's forgiveness. You don't have to ask for God's forgiveness. You're already forgiven because he never even saw it as wrong in the first place. Like his love is so immaculate that it's a love that knows no record of wrong. And I think there's no judgment. You know, there's no judgment in love. It's just in pure love, in that pure unconditional love. And that's the resonance that God holds. So, you know, that's what you can experience, and that's what you can feel. And it's amazing.
But that love though, that love, like you know, I feel love. Like I read a lot of near-death experience books, right? Like I'm obsessed with it, right? Like to hear someone or read someone leaving their body and experiencing that joy and that powerful love. Like, you know, I love my children very much. I love my wife very much, but the way they describe this other type of love is so powerful, man. Like to hear you talk about it, like that's what I want to experience. Like I want to know him for the love that he gives us. And I want to feel that.
Don't get too attached to a gender, because you're not going to feel it. It's not going to be a him. You know, it's gonna be a feeling. It's gonna be, and sometimes, you know, sometimes the communication can come in a certain way, and it can sound like a male voice to translate to you in that way. But it's pure love, and that's something I've been blessed to be able to experience, typically with the assistance of some of the plants. You know, one of the substances that I've experimented with that has brought me probably consistently to that feeling is 5-MeO-DMT, which comes from the Colorado River toad. And they, you know, kind of milk the toad, and it's rich in this 5-MeO-DMT, which is a psychoactive compound. And when you do that, you can listen to Mike Tyson talk about that on Joe Rogan, actually. But when you do that, that's where your whole body is just kind of merged with God, and you feel the complete lack of well, you can. And I'm not saying everybody should go run out and do this, because it can also be incredibly challenging. And this is just my personal experience with it. Is it's union, it's temporary union with the divine, and you get to feel what it feels like not to meet God, but to be God, you know, because it awakens the divine within us all, and it's interwoven with us entirely. And that's the collapse of separation between us and the divine. It's an indescribable feeling.
To remember who we truly are.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, dude. Like how did it change you though once you experienced that?
Well, interestingly, the first time it was like a novelty. It was like, wow, that was really interesting. But then I kind of categorized it as like just one of those interesting experiences. And then the second time I was like, whoa, it happened again. Like, that's fucking wild. And the third time it was like, all right, I can't ignore this. I have to recognize my own divinity within. And that's an incredibly powerful thing when you just have incontrovertible personal experience to know that, you know, God is within us as much as he's without. You know, he's both in and out. He's, as Paul Selig said, you know, God is not just somewhere in the sky. He's in the dirt and in the mud and inside of all of us as well. And that's, you know, if you look in the mystical teachings, you know, that you'll find in the Bible, if you read deeper, you'll see that expressed. But that's not enough. I think this is a show not tell game. If you really want to know God, it's not to listen to other people talk about it. You know, don't listen to me talk about it. Go feel it for yourself. And that's the way to really know.
Aubrey, how can people connect with you?
Lots of ways. Aubrey Marcus podcast is, where I put out all my best ideas and have amazing conversations with the best people that I can find. So that's a great place. Instagram at Aubrey Marcus. If you want those inspirational texts in the morning, you can text me 512-572-5222. Those are probably some of the best places. And if you're looking for any of the things that we talked about, you can go to onnit.com, onnit.com/Aubrey and save a little cash while you're there. So, that's pretty much it.
I love the podcast. I'm a huge fan, dude. Really. I mean, I listen to a shit to almost all of them. Not because of this interview, but because I'm genuinely a huge fan of yours.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
You definitely influenced me for the better, and you definitely helped me grow spiritually. And through our friend Paul, I mean, it's just been, I'm definitely at the very beginning of my growth. And I thank both you guys and for everyone who's been a part of that journey for me. But before I let you go, what do you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done with?
I really want to be known as the guy who enjoyed the second half of his life the most. That's really what I'm focused on, because all the other things is just, they're sandcastles. I just want to make sure that I'm going to do what I'm here to do, and I'm never going to stop that. And I know that, but I want to enjoy it now, because I've done a lot. And the thing that I want for the next half of my life is to enjoy it while I do it. And that's really what I want my legacy to be.
Yeah, that's a powerful shit, dude. Thank you so much for joining the show. I know my audience is going to love this. You're such a good dude for coming on. Thank you so much.
Of course, man.
I look forward to, following you some more, and I'm ready for your clothing line, man.
Yeah, it's available. Check it out. Yeah, good to go. Thank you, man. It was a great interview. I appreciate you. And I understand why so many people love your show.